Okay, so let's dive right into this. You've got this image, right? Jimmy Fallon, everyone's pal, the Tonight Show host, all laughs and, you know, fun.
Yeah, that's the public face. But
Mhm.
the sources you shared, especially that big Rolling Stone piece, they suggest something really different might have been going on behind the curtain. A toxic workplace.
Exactly. Toxic workplace. So we're digging into the material you provided to kind of get behind that image, understand these, well, conflicting stories. What did the sources actually claim was happening?
Right. And it really boils down to this question that comes out of the sources. Is it one Jimmy Fallon or maybe two?
Yeah. So our mission here is just to unpack these sources, pull out the key stuff, and see what really stands out from the material you gathered.
Okay, let's get into it. The Rolling Stone report, it was based on, what, 16 former and current staffers?
Yeah.
It described the environment as a constant state of fear.
Constant state of fear. Wow. That phrase itself is pretty heavy.
Hmm.
And the sources seem to pinpoint the main issue, or the alleged main issue. Fallon's behavior, described as erratic, unpredictable.
Yeah, they use that phrase, good Jimmy, bad Jimmy. Like, staff felt they were always walking on eggshells, never knew what to expect.
Walking on eggshells, and the impacts described in the sources. That's where it gets really concerning, right?
Definitely. We're talking claims of, like, demeaning comments, passive-aggressive stuff, and those details about staff needing crying rooms. That's pretty intense.
Crying rooms, yeah. And some people apparently making dark jokes like about wanting to kill themselves just to get through it. It sounds awful.
It does. And the sources mention serious mental health consequences reported by some staff. 7 former employees talked about anxiety, nightmares, even physical symptoms linked to the job.
And it went even further than that, based on the sources. 3 people claim they actually contemplated suicide because of that environment.
Which is just incredibly serious.
Yeah. And this whole picture, the alleged unpredictability, it seems, from the sources you shared, to connect directly to something you asked about the long-running rumors about alcohol.
Exactly. You wanted to know if the sources touched on that, and they definitely do. They provide context, like going back to his SNL days. Talk of heavy partying.
Right. Someone quoted described them as super-functioning alcoholics back then.
Right.
And mentions of, like, bar fights even.
And that pattern, or at least the perception of it, seemed to continue, according to the sources. There were those public incidents, remember, the bar thing in 2014, those injuries in 2015.
Yeah, page 6 was all over those injuries. And the sources say NBC execs were reportedly concerned about his drinking around that time.
Which Fallon pushed back on, right? He did that New York Times interview in 2017, said he didn't have a problem.
He did. But these sources you found include conflicting accounts from staffers. People claiming they smelled alcohol on his breath at work multiple times.
And observing him, seemingly hungover, and how that could apparently throw off the whole workday, affect his mood, the atmosphere.
So that's the core allegation picture. But we should be clear the sources also included the other side, right?
Absolutely. There's a counter narrative in there. NBC put out a statement, sort of general, saying issues were looked into, and people like Jerry Seinfeld came out publicly defending Fallon.
Seinfeld specifically denied one of the stories in the report, yeah.
And some current staff members, according to the sources, also defended the show. They often said, any past issues were maybe down to previous managers before the current showrunner, Chris Miller, came in, suggesting things are better now.
Okay, but there was a sort of footnote to that in the sources, wasn't there? Something the reporter added.
Yes, that's a key detail from the reporting itself. The journalist noted that when they apparently tried to contact the current employees NBC suggested, those employees didn't actually back up the positive accounts NBC had implied they would give.
Huh. Okay, so that adds another layer of complexity there.
It does. It makes the counter-narrative a bit more, nuanced based on what the source material presents.
So if we pull all this together, what's the big picture from these sources you shared?
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Very. It suggests that, the happy-go-lucky public guy might have existed alongside some pretty serious alleged workplace problems and maybe personal struggles, at least for a significant period.
The evidence laid out in these sources, it does point pretty strongly towards a time of real toxicity for quite a few employees.
Potentially linked, according to these claims, to that alleged unpredictable behavior and these recurring alcohol concerns we talked about, despite the public denials.
And the response. The sources say Fallon did apologize privately.
Yeah, a Zoom call with staff, apparently just hours after the report dropped. Expressed remorse, reportedly, but publicly. Mostly silence. Didn't address it on the show.
Which, as the sources noted, PR experts called pretty effective crisis management. kept the public damage fairly minimal.
Hmm. Which really underlines how complex this all is, doesn't it? A PR comeback, maybe some internal changes. It doesn't necessarily erase the experiences described in the sources for the people who went through that time.
Yeah, it leaves you thinking, based on everything in these sources, what does this whole situation really tell us about, celebrity culture, about accountability?
And maybe about whether a quick recovery for a brand actually means real, lasting change has happened behind the scenes, or if it's just, well, effective brand protection. It's a big question for the entertainment world today.